Hello YouTube, this is Ahmed here, bringing you another episode of the Wargame European Escalation archives. Today we'll be looking at NATO Tanks and possibly NATO Infantry depending on how long it takes, so let's get right into it. Okay, first up is the AMX-30B main battle tank. So this is the French battle tank. This is actually quite a good tank to start off with. So it's got the sort of standard main gun, about 2,000 meters range, very accurate with 8. And the AP power is decent at 5. It's also got a good amount of ammunition. It's got the should be legendary French autocannon, the F1. So it's got very good anti everything if it gets close enough, especially against helicopters, and a sort of basic machine gun for last minute sort of defense again, I guess, against infantry. Front side, front 3. One everywhere else, 60 kilometers an hour, so it's not too fast. Doesn't have a good stabilizer though, so this isn't a very mobile unit, I'd say. But still at 40, it's got everything you need. Although if you want to pay 50, we get a little upgrade in firepower and speed. So the gun shoots further and does a bit more damage, and it travels faster at 70. So this turns into a fairly speedy tank now. Not much else. And then for another 5 you get a boost in accuracy to 10. So yeah, the AMX is quite a good sort of standard battle tank because it's fairly fast and it's sort of got all the sort of defenses you need against threats that a tank might go up against. Then you could always go up against the AMX-32. This is the prototype version. Because it's prototype, it won't have too many units that you can field, but it's actually a pretty good gun. It's sort of like the final upgrade of the original AMX. So it's got a 2,200 meter range, nearly 2,300, full 10 accuracy, a nice AP attack power of 9. So this thing could be most 80 GMs in terms of damage, I guess. It's got the auto cannon and machine gun standard. Front 5s, side 2, rear 2, and top 1. So that's quite a solid amount of armor for a tank at 80, I guess, for NATO. Stabilizer normal, so it can fire fairly well on the move, but it'll suffer a bit. And the speed 70, good range as well. So this is actually it's a fairly good tank for 80, but just remember you might not be able to field too many of it. Then we've got the Challenger 1, and this is one of the best of British tanks, I'd say. Very good for defense. It's 140, so it costs a lot, but it's got the same kind of range as the AMX-32. Not as accurate, but just as damaging, and carries 40 rounds. So this thing can shoot for a lot longer than needing supplies, and it's got the same kind of machine gun for defense against infantry. But again, I wouldn't really recommend it because they're in RPG range when this machine gun comes into range. It's incredibly slow at 45, so don't expect to be going anywhere too fast. And its range is 500, so it's normally quite reliant on supplies if you want to move it around a bit. But where it comes into its own is its armor. It's got 10 frontal armor, side 8 armor, rear 3, top 3. So this thing is a complete sponge for rockets, ATMs. It can just take it all in its stride. So this is a very good defensive tank. It can shell out quite a bit of damage, and it can take an immense amount of damage, but it can't attack very well. It's a defensive tank. It sort of symbolizes everything that was about that showed British priorities: firepower and armor. Okay, so the Chieftain, another British tank. It's quite cheap at 45. It's got front 5, side 4, and then rear 2, top 2. So it's quite well armored for 45, sort of comparable to the T-72. However, it's slow. It's got a bad stabilizer, so it can't fire on the move. Although I'm not really sure if there's a difference between firing on the move and driving, because it's so slow. But it's got a lot of ammunition, and this gun isn't too bad. I mean, it's got a good amount of damage, but accuracy is a bit bad. So you might want to throw in a few extra bucks to give it some accuracy. Then you give it to the Mark 5. It increases it to 2,100 meter range. And a bit extra of frontal armor as well. And then the Mark 10 gives it a lot of accuracy. Actually, costs 20 extra, but you get another level up armor, a normal stabilizer, and a very accurate gun. So it's you know, it's sort of comparable to the AMX, I guess, where you're trading sort of the Swiss Army knife effect for good armor, and speed, I guess. Anyway, so on to West Germany. They've got the Leopard 1A1. So this is the first and only tank I think you get. For 25, it's a pretty cheap tank, and its gun, you know, it's got the range of most tanks. I'm not really sure why they highlight it as exceptional. It's quite basic, really, for a gun, and it's got you know, it's low accuracy, low armor piercing part. You know, it's not that good a gun, really. Fairly slow. Front 3 armor. It's okay for 25. Side, you know, 1 everywhere else. No stabilizer. This is a pretty basic tank that will get killed quite quickly. Although the good thing about the Leopard is it is a great upgrade tree. So you pay extra 10, and you get a bit more power in the gun and a machine gun as well. You know, that's a good 10 points there. Throw in another 10 points. You get fewer rounds but a greater accuracy, so it makes better use of those rounds. Could be useful for supply management purposes. Armor's increased at the front and the sides, and it gets a stabilizer. Could help a bit, but it's only a bad one. Another 10 in there, and you get an increase in range and accuracy, and a general improvement in sort of stabilizer optics for another 10, and then for another 5 you get a 50-meter extension in range. I wouldn't bother with the 1A5 there for that reason. It doesn't really offer anything over the 1A4. Actually, it does actually. Accuracy in AP goes up as well for extra 5, so that's actually not a bad trade-off. So yeah, the Leopard is sort of standard battle tank where it won't, you know, win against any good pack tanks, but against the sort of T55, T62s, it's a cost-effective method of dealing with them. Then we've got the Leopard 2. This is a pretty good gun. It's 120s for the base, so it's pretty expensive, but its main gun is very nice. 2,200 meter range, good accuracy, amazing AP power, got a good amount of ammunition. Its machine gun isn't that good. It doesn't have any autocannon or anything. It's just a standard machine gun, but it's got front armor 9, side 4, rear 2, top 2, so it's a very well armored unit. It's quite fast at 70. It's also got a good stabilizer, so it can fire quite accurately at 70. So this is a pretty good tank, but if you spend an extra 5, you get even more armor. Front 10, side 5. That's probably a good $5 I'd spend there, because, you know, when you're spending this much, you want to keep it safe. And then for another 20 on top of that, you get exceptional stabilizers, normal optics, and a much better gun. This is pretty much the ideal tank for maneuver warfare. It's accurate, does a lot of damage. You know, it's got good armor as well, and it's exceptional. You won't notice any difference between a moving and a stationary Leopard. Quite, you know, very useful. Then we go to the standard all-American weapon, the M1 Abrams. So its gun's, you know, fairly basic. It's accurate and powerful, yes, but it doesn't have a lot of ammunition. It's also got a lot of machine guns to help out. So it's a good sort of anti-infantry weapon, because it's got the M2 Browning to start off with, and then the M240 when they get too close. However, remember RPG range and all that. 60, so it's, you know, it's not that mobile, but it'll do the job, and it's got a fair amount of armor. Not as much as a Leopard 2, but it's costing 20 less. Stabilizer normal, that's important to notice. So this thing can be, you know, it can fire effectively on the move. However, because it's got a pretty bad operational range, and it goes through fuel quite fast, so this can be quite a supply heavy tank. Spend an extra 15 points, you get the M1 1P Abrams, where you get a bit of its gun's a bit more powerful, it's got a bit more armor, and it's got a good stabilizer, so that's a fairly good, you know, upgrade. And then for another 20, you get the M1A1 Abrams, which gets a really nice gun, probably comparable to the Leopard 2A4, except it's a bit less powerful. You know, 9 armor, 7 side, exceptional maneuverability. This is a comparison to the Leopard 2A4. These are the two maneuver warfare kings, but just remember, this will need supplies. The M1 Abrams is a pretty powerful tank, especially for its price, because it costs less than the Leopards, but these things can queue through your supplies quite quickly. Something to note right on. Then we've got the Sheridan. This is probably one of the best NATO sort of medium tanks that NATO has, probably along with a Starship. So it's quite fast at 70, not that well armoured or has that good operational range, but it's one of the few NATO tanks that has an 80 km. It's got good, and then it's got 9 missiles, so although it might not be that accurate, it can probably hit its target. Its main gun is okay for, you know, it's got the 4.444, so it's a sort of all-purpose gun. Probably, you know, but compared to like the 1A1s and stuff, you know, it trades AP power for general usage, and it's got the M2 Browning for good infantry. This is sort of all-in-one tank, I'd say. It can do everything you ask it, except for helicopters, and it does it quite well. Give it an upgrade, you get a better 80 km. Give it another upgrade, 5 ounce. You lose the 80 km, but you get a better gun and some better side armor. I wouldn't bother with this version. Also, it's a prototype, so you won't be able to have that much of it. Just stick with the 2 Sheridan variants. They're sort of Swiss Army knife. For NATO, then you've got the Patton. This is another sort of basic battle tank. So, as you can see, 30. Probably wouldn't use this one. It's got a decent gun. It's got a lot of ammunition, but it's very slow. Then you can spend a bit to make it faster. Better gun and faster again. Bit more armor and a better gun again, and then even faster and with a good stabilizer now. Although this is a prototype version, so be wary. Remember, when you see prototype, think limited production numbers. But overall, Pattons, it's just another one of these sort of basic tanks where you're not breaking the bank, but you're not getting a King Tiger or anything, an all-inspiring tank. Then you've got the Starship. This is a sort of Sheridan, I guess, where it's got the main gun, 80 km, and Browning, but it's slow. And then you can spend a bit extra to get an autocannon. And it goes a bit faster. So this, again, is a sort of Swiss Army knife. It's got the autocannon for helicopters, main gun for sort of everything. It's also a bit more accurate than the Sheridan. And also this 80 km for tanks, so good all-in-one tanks. Then you've got the MBT-70. Let's see. So this is it's like these kind of things upgraded a bit to sort of the heavy tank status. So it's got the autocannon, it's got the main gun, but it's a lot more powerful, as you can see, and its 80 km is a lot more accurate. It's also faster and it's got more armor, but it's expensive. It's fairly expensive at 75, not too much, but again, prototype, you won't be able to field too many of these things. Also, its range is quite poor, similar to an Abrams, so this is another sort of, this will probably do a more average job than your sort of maneuver tanks, and it's probably better on the offensive than the Challenger, but remember, it's supply heavy, and it won't do as well in a dedicated fight. As in the bad stabilizer won't be as good in maneuver warfare, especially with the 80 km won't be able to fire. And you can upgrade it though to get a bit more specialist to the German variant of the MBT-70. In this version, the main gun is quite good. I think it's comparable to the Leopard 2A4. Yeah, actually the Leopard 2A1 actually. Same gun as Leopard 2A1, it's got the autocannon for sort of aircraft defense. Still a prototype unit, remember, limited production. Loses the 80 again, but it's got a sort of good stabilizer. So this sort of version is leaning a bit more towards the maneuver warfare than the American one. You might think it's a bit odd to lose an 80 again, which is so powerful and it costs quite a bit more, about 35 more. But this is a pretty good sort of tank on tank unit. Right, so that'll do us for today. I know tanks are a bit of a short episode, but trust me, infantry's quite a long one. I can't really put them together. So until then, thank you and goodbye.